Disclaimer: the story is a work of creative writing inspired by real-life themes. While it is based on emotional and realistic situations, all characters, events, and specific details are fictionalized for dramatic effect. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, is purely coincidental. The purpose of the story is to entertain and evoke emotion, not to depict actual events or individuals. Reader discretion is advised, as some moments may include mature themes and intense emotions. The day had been unusually quiet. The kind of quiet that makes you notice the ticking of the clock, the faint hum of the refrigerator, and even your own breathing. I had been working from home, lost in spreadsheets and deadlines, when my phone buzzed. It was Daniel. We hadn't spoken much in months, not because of any falling out, but because life had simply taken us in different directions. He was a family friend, someone I'd known for years, and someone I trusted without question. His text was short: "I'm in your area. Mind if I drop by?" Something about the message felt casual, harmless. I said yes. I didn't think twice. When he arrived, he had that familiar easy smile, the kind that made you forget time had passed. We sat in the living room, sipping coffee and catching up on everything and nothing. His voice was warm, his stories vivid, and soon the conversation drifted to his new hobby, massage therapy. "I've been practicing a lot," he said, leaning back in his chair. "Helps with stress, tension, headaches. You'd be surprised how much better people feel afterward." I laughed, teasing him about becoming the neighborhood healer. That's when he offered. "Want me to try? Just a quick one. You've been working all day, your shoulders must be tight." It was true. My neck felt stiff, my shoulders heavy from hours at the desk. It sounded harmless enough, and I trusted him. Still, I hesitated. Letting someone into your physical space wasn't something I did lightly. But this was Daniel, someone I'd known since I was 19, someone who had been at my birthday dinners and family gatherings. I agreed. We moved to the spare room because it had the most space and a quieter atmosphere. He told me to sit on the edge of the bed while he stood behind me. His hands rested gently on my shoulders at first, light and warm. The room was filled with the faint scent of lavender from the candle I'd lit earlier. The first few minutes felt normal, pleasant, even. His fingers worked into the knots at the base of my neck, and I could feel the tension melting. We talked a little, then fell into silence. It was the kind of silence that felt safe, not awkward. But somewhere deep inside, I sensed something. It was small at first, an almost imperceptible shift in the air. His touch slowed, lingered just a second longer than before. My skin prickled, not from discomfort yet, but from awareness. I told myself it was nothing. Just my imagination. After all, this was Daniel. Or so I thought. The room was dim, lit only by the soft glow of the lavender candle on the dresser. The air felt warm and thick, the kind of warmth that wrapped itself around you and made your muscles loosen without you realizing. Outside, the late afternoon sun filtered weakly through the curtains, casting faint golden streaks across the carpet. Daniel's voice broke the silence. "Just relax," he said gently, as if the words themselves could melt tension. His tone was steady, confident, the kind you'd expect from someone who knew exactly what they were doing. I shifted slightly, letting my shoulders drop and my breathing slow. He began working in slow, deliberate movements, starting from my neck and rolling his palms down toward my upper back. The pressure was firm but careful, as though he'd measured it perfectly for me. My body responded almost instantly. Each knot he pressed seemed to release in tiny waves of relief. I could hear the faint creak of the floor as he adjusted his stance behind me, and the rhythmic sound of his breathing became part of the moment. It was quiet enough to notice small details, like the subtle scent of his cologne mingling with the lavender in the air, or the faint scratch of his sleeve brushing my arm when he leaned in closer. "Your muscles are tense," he murmured, his fingers finding another knot just below my shoulder blade. "You really do work too much." I laughed lightly. "You're probably right." It felt easy, comfortable. This wasn't awkward or forced. It felt almost professional, though we both knew he wasn't officially trained. He told me about how he'd started doing massages for his mother, then friends, and how he enjoyed seeing people feel better afterward. There was a care in his voice that made me believe he meant it. The conversation faded again, replaced by the soft rhythm of his hands moving across my back. The world outside felt far away, no emails, no deadlines, no responsibilities, just the steady, methodical touch and the sense of being cared for. Every so often, his hands would pause, holding in place for just a breath longer than necessary before moving again. It was subtle enough that I almost didn't notice, but it left a trace of awareness each time. "Better?" he asked, his tone softer now. "Much better," I replied, and I meant it. My shoulders felt lighter, my head clearer. For a moment, I closed my eyes, letting myself sink into the stillness of the room. I didn't know it yet, but this calm, this safe cocoon of warmth and trust, was the very thing that would make what came next hit even harder. Because comfort is only comfort, until it's broken. The massage had settled into a rhythm, the kind that lulled me into a half-conscious haze. My breathing was slow, my thoughts wandering lazily, dipping in and out of awareness. Daniel's hands moved with certainty, press, glide, release, like he'd memorized the map of my back. Then he shifted. His hands slid from my upper back down toward my arms, his thumbs brushing the inside of my shoulders before moving along my forearms. It wasn't unusual, not exactly, but it felt different, more deliberate, as though the purpose wasn't only to ease muscle tension but to notice me. "Lift your arm for me," he said softly. I did as told, and he guided it gently, rotating the joint in small circles before letting his fingers run down to my wrist. The skin there was sensitive, and the warmth of his touch lingered like a slow burn. He moved behind me again, pressing into the muscles along my spine. The pressure deepened, and I let out a quiet sigh without meaning to. It was instinctive, an exhale of relief. I heard a faint chuckle behind me, low and almost amused. "You really were tense," he murmured, his voice closer now. I could feel his breath near the back of my neck, warm against my skin. I told myself it was nothing, just proximity, just the way he had to stand to reach certain areas. And yet, my body reacted before my mind could catch up. My skin prickled, goosebumps rising even in the warmth of the room. His hands drifted upward again, this time along the sides of my neck, thumbs pressing gently at the base of my skull. I closed my eyes, focusing on the feeling, the slow rhythm of his movements. It was comforting, yes, but there was an undercurrent now, a subtle energy that hadn't been there before. The silence felt heavier. Even the candlelight seemed to take on a different shade, softer yet sharper somehow. I became aware of every sound, the faint rub of skin against fabric, the slight hitch in his breathing, the way his hands hesitated for the briefest moment before moving again. "Let me try something," he said, his tone quiet but certain. He adjusted his stance, and I felt his fingertips trail, feather-light, along my shoulder before pressing firmly again. The shift between soft and strong sent a ripple through me, one I couldn't quite explain. I kept telling myself, he's just being thorough, this is just a massage. But somewhere in the back of my mind, a small, insistent thought was whispering, no, this is something else. Still, I didn't speak. I just sat there, letting the moment stretch, unsure whether to trust my instinct or dismiss it as paranoia. It was only the beginning. At first, it was hard to pinpoint when the change happened. One moment, Daniel's hands were moving in that same steady, practiced rhythm. The next, there was a subtle difference, a slowness, almost like hesitation, but not quite. It wasn't the kind of pause that comes from uncertainty. It felt intentional. He pressed into my shoulders again, but this time, his thumbs lingered a little too long before gliding down my arms. The movement was smooth, unbroken, but the sensation was different, more aware, more deliberate. My body stiffened for a second, just enough for him to notice. "Relax," he whispered, so close that the word brushed the side of my ear. His voice was low, calming, but it carried something else beneath the surface, something I couldn't name yet. The warmth in the room felt heavier now, almost suffocating. The soft lavender scent that had been soothing moments ago seemed sharper, mingling with the faint smell of his cologne. I could hear his breathing clearly, slow, controlled, and I realized mine had quickened without me meaning to. He moved closer, his knees almost touching the back of the chair I was sitting on. His hands slid to my upper back, pressing firmly, then softer, then firm again, in an unhurried pattern that felt almost like a conversation without words. Each touch seemed to ask a question my body wasn't sure how to answer. I tried to focus on the practical side of it. This is just muscle work, nothing more. But my heartbeat betrayed me. Every time his fingers brushed too close to my collarbone, a pulse of awareness shot through me. Every time his hand slowed, it felt like the moment before something was about to be said or done. The silence between us had changed. Before, it had been comfortable. Now, it was charged, thick with something unspoken. I wanted to break it, to say something light and meaningless, but my throat felt tight. Then he leaned in, not touching me anywhere except his hands on my back, but close enough that I could feel the faint warmth of his chest near my shoulder. "You've been carrying a lot," he said softly. His words were simple, but the way he said them made my skin prickle. It wasn't just about my muscles, and we both knew it. I didn't answer. I didn't know how. The shift was complete now. This was no longer the safe, casual massage it had started as. This was something else, something balanced between comfort and danger, between trust and something I wasn't ready to name. And deep down, I knew, the moment he spoke again, everything would change. His hands slowed until they were almost still, just resting on my shoulders. The weight of them was steady but light, like he was grounding me in place. My eyes stayed closed, not because I was fully relaxed, but because I wasn't sure what would happen if I looked at him right now. The room seemed impossibly quiet, no hum from the refrigerator down the hall, no distant traffic, nothing but the faint sound of our breathing. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears, loud enough that it almost drowned him out when he finally spoke. "I've thought about this for years." The words were soft, almost too soft, but they sliced through the air like a blade. My eyes flew open, staring at the dim wall ahead. I didn't turn to face him, didn't move, but my body felt like it had just been jolted out of a dream. "What?" My voice cracked on the single word. He didn't answer right away. Instead, his hands moved again, slower this time, fingertips brushing the curve of my neck. The touch wasn't quite the same anymore. It wasn't clinical, wasn't neutral. It carried weight. "I didn't mean to say that out loud," he murmured. But I knew he had. The words hadn't slipped by accident. They had been waiting, pressed against his lips for far too long. I tried to process what he meant, but my mind refused to settle. Years? What had he been thinking all this time? My pulse thudded in my throat. I wanted to stand up, to put distance between us, but my legs felt heavy, pinned in place by something stronger than muscle tension. He leaned in just a fraction more, enough that his breath skimmed my ear. And then came the sentence that would stay with me long after this day was over, words I couldn't unhear, no matter how much I wished I could. "I've always wondered what it would feel like to be closer to you. Really closer." I froze. Completely. The kind of stillness that isn't calm but absolute shock. Every inch of my skin was suddenly aware of the heat from his hands, the weight of the air between us, the nearness of his body. My thoughts clashed between disbelief and the undeniable truth that something had just crossed a line we could never step back over. He didn't say anything else. He didn't have to, because the damage was already done. And in that dim, lavender-scented room, I realized I was no longer just someone getting a friendly massage. I was someone holding my breath, wondering if the ground beneath me was about to give way. I didn't move. I couldn't. His words hung in the air, heavy and unshakable, like they had soaked into the walls themselves. It was as if time had paused, not stopped entirely, but slowed to a crawl, forcing me to feel every single second that passed. My mind scrambled for meaning. What exactly did he mean? Was this just an odd, ill-timed comment, or had he been carrying this thought for years, like he said? No matter how I tried to soften the edges, it kept cutting deeper. The warmth of his hands was suddenly unbearable. A moment ago, they'd felt comforting. Now, they felt like they were holding me in place. My shoulders tensed again, undoing all the work the massage had done. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. "Daniel." My voice was barely above a whisper, but even that sounded strange to my own ears, thin, uncertain. He didn't reply. The silence after my name was more telling than any answer. His hands lifted slightly, as though he'd thought better of touching me, but then they rested back down, lighter this time, hesitant. The air between us was thick with things neither of us dared to say. I could feel the shift in his breathing, slower, heavier, like he was waiting for me to respond in a way that would either close this moment forever or open it into something else entirely. I thought about every memory we'd shared over the years. Birthdays. Holidays. Those long conversations on the porch when life felt simpler. And now, layered on top of all of that, was this moment, an uninvited truth dropped into my hands with no warning. The betrayal wasn't sharp like anger. It was dull, sinking in slowly, the kind of hurt that comes from realizing someone you trusted had been holding back a version of themselves all along. I don't know what to say, I admitted finally. The words felt fragile, as if they might shatter in the air. Daniel's thumbs moved in a slow, almost absent-minded circle on my shoulders. You don't have to say anything, he murmured. But he was wrong. Silence wasn't neutral anymore. It was complicit. I could have stood up right then. I could have ended it, walked away, pretended it never happened. But my body was locked in that strange space between shock and understanding, where decisions feel like moving through water, slow, heavy, unclear. The candle flickered, casting shadows across the wall. I stared at the shifting shapes, wondering how something so small could feel so loud. What he had said wasn't just a confession. It was a revelation that would change every interaction from this moment forward. And the worst part was, I wasn't sure which of us would regret it more. Neither of us said another word for a long moment. The quiet felt nothing like the peaceful stillness from before. This silence was sharp, almost brittle, as if a single wrong sound could shatter it completely. Daniel's hands moved again, but they were different now, tentative, almost testing, as though he was gauging whether I would pull away. I didn't. Not because I wanted the contact, but because moving felt like admitting that everything he'd just said was real. I kept my eyes fixed on the wall ahead, pretending my attention was somewhere far away. But I could feel every shift in his posture, every change in his breathing. We both knew that we had stepped into new territory, one neither of us had openly agreed to cross. He worked his way down my arms again, slower this time, fingertips lingering in places that would have felt unremarkable an hour ago. Now, each touch carried meaning, a question hanging in the air that I wasn't ready to answer. When he leaned in again, his voice was lower than before. If this is too much, tell me to stop. It wasn't an apology. It was an invitation. I could have ended it right there with a single word, but it caught in my throat. Instead, I shifted slightly in my seat, a movement so small it could be interpreted in a dozen different ways. His hands paused, reading me, before continuing, still slow, still deliberate. The tension in the room wasn't just mine anymore. I could feel his restraint, the way he was holding himself back from saying more, from doing more. It was like we were standing at the edge of a cliff, both knowing one step forward would mean there was no going back. My thoughts tangled in a mess of contradiction. Part of me wanted to rewind to an hour ago, when this was just a casual visit from an old friend. Another part, the part one didn't want to admit existed, was curious about the version of him I had never seen until now. But I didn't choose either path. I chose nothing. We stayed in that strange in-between space, his hands working in slow, steady motions while our unspoken thoughts filled the air. The massage continued, but its purpose had changed completely. It wasn't about relief anymore, it was about testing limits, about seeing how far we could go without naming it. When he finally stepped back, the absence of his touch felt almost as heavy as its presence had. I didn't look at him. He didn't look at me. It was a silent agreement. This moment would stay unacknowledged, but never forgotten. And though neither of us said it aloud, we both knew things could never go back to the way they were. When Daniel finally stepped back, the air between us felt heavier than it had all afternoon. The warmth of his hands still lingered on my skin, but now it was tangled with the weight of his words. I stood slowly, avoiding his eyes. My legs felt unsteady, though I wasn't sure if it was from sitting too long or from the way the last hour had unfolded. He moved toward the door without rushing, like nothing out of the ordinary had happened, but I could see it in the way his shoulders held. He knew this wasn't just another casual visit. "Thanks for the massage," I said quietly. The words sounded hollow, too small to carry what I really felt. He gave me a half smile. "Anytime." That was it. No apology. No explanation. Just a single word that landed with more weight than it should have. When the door closed behind him, the silence of the house wrapped around me again, but it wasn't the same kind of quiet as before. It was louder somehow, filled with the echo of everything we hadn't said. I sank onto the couch, my mind replaying the moment he leaned in, the exact tone of his voice, the heat of his breath when he whispered. I told myself it didn't mean anything, that maybe I'd misunderstood, maybe I'd read too much into his words. But deep down, I knew better. What he said wasn't something you could misinterpret. It was deliberate. It was personal. It was dangerous. Over the years, I had trusted Daniel in ways I didn't trust most people. He'd been there for family dinners, for moments of celebration and loss. And now, in a single afternoon, all of that history felt rewritten. I tried to imagine the next time I'd see him, if there even would be a next time. Would we pretend it never happened? Would he try to bring it up again? Or worse, would I always be wondering what might have happened if I'd answered differently? The lavender scent from the candles still lingered in the air, sharp and bittersweet. I blew it out, watching the thin ribbon of smoke curl upward and vanish, wishing the memory could fade as easily. But it wouldn't. Because the truth is, it wasn't just what Daniel did that left me shaken. It was what I felt in response, the hesitation to stop him, the strange mix of discomfort and curiosity, the way part of me leaned into the moment instead of away from it. That was the part one couldn't explain. And that was the part that would keep me awake long after the house had gone quiet again. 5.